Will you start? Yeah, okay, great. Okay. Um, Thanks so much for having me today. In a very non-characteristic way for me, I'm not doing a PowerPoint. And that's 2 or 3 talks I've stopped doing PowerPoints. For whatever reasons, I think when I do PowerPoints, I just start talking to the PowerPoint. And I get in conversation with it. So I'm trying to limit myself. So the talk today is from Ottoman Jews to Turkish ones, the making of a disappearing religious minority during the first decades of the Turkish Republic. The recent Netflix series, The Club, has given Turkish viewers an opportunity to see what Jewish life in Istanbul was like during the 1950s. This was also the first time many in the audience had ever heard Judeo-Spanish. Setting aside that the series is ahistorical in its timeline and that it's difficult to understand the historical events if one does not know the history itself, the show does challenge viewers to ask questions about Turkey's Jewish past and the persecution Jews and other non-Muslims encountered during the first decades of the Republic. As the series progresses, it develops in a story of its own, with depictions of Jewish life, serving as a constant reminder that there once was a vibrant Jewish community in Istanbul, alongside other non-Muslims in the city's heart. However, one part of the series falls short, opting to remain within the confines of the Turkish narrative. This concerns the Jewish migration, what was then the young state of Israel. In the show, Israel is portrayed as a destination where one only goes to escape, whether it is the mother Matilda, who after being released from prison sees Israel as her only option to begin a new life, or Matilda's unwed daughter Rachel, who made pregnant by a Turkish Muslim man, opts to join Mordiko, a hapless Jewish man who is willing to accept being the father in return for Rachel's hand in marriage. Then there is another member of the community who questions Matilda when she approaches him to get papers to go to Israel, reminding her that Turkey is their homeland, Vatan, where they have lived for 400 years. His judgmental attitude alludes to a sense of betrayal, not only for Turkish Jewish heritage, to whom the Ottomans graciously gave sanctuary, but also to the Turkish state, which is now their homeland. In short, the show stays within the current and historical status quo by avoiding showing that the many motivations Jews had for migrating, among them Zionism. The Jewish life portrayed in the series misses out on the fact that with the establishment of Israel in 1948, 50% of the Jewish community in Turkey decided to leave. In today's talk, I will focus on what led the Jews of Turkey to leave the new republic and highlight why so many of them went to Palestine and later on to the state of Israel. During the Ottoman years, especially after the 1908 Young Turk Revolution, the multifaceted Ottoman Jewish community, which spanned from Istanbul to Jerusalem, Baghdad to Beirut, Salonika to Damascus, gained new visibility in Ottoman political and public life. This was evident not only in the parliament, where they had a strong presence despite their small numbers, but within the ranks of the military as well, which for the first time included Jewish army officers. This could be seen in the universities, where you had a contingent of new immigrants from the Russian Empire, including David Ben-Gurion, the iconic Jewish leader who had paved the way for the Jewish state during the post-Ottoman Jewish yeshuvs. In fact, one can argue that during the post-Young Turk Revolution era, Jews, whether Sephardic, Ashkenazi, or Arab, could begin to imagine themselves not just as a spiritual community, but also a growing political one. In fact, a strong Ottoman Jewish identity emerged in the very years just before the Ottoman Empire ceased to exist. Even if the Jews in Palestine were in touch with what was happening in Cairo and Beirut, it was in Istanbul that they met in the hallways of universities, in its local synagogues, and in their Maccabi sports clubs, and even in various jobs throughout the bustling city. Prominent figures like Chief Rabbi Chaim Nachum actively wove a modern sense of Ottomanism into their roles serving the Jewish community throughout the Ottoman lands. The emergence of a political Ottoman Jewish elite, such as the influential members of parliament Emanuel Karaso and Nissim Mazliach, staunchly aligned with the Committee of Union and Progress, or Moise Cohen, who opted for writing in the mainstream Ottoman Turkish press rather than isolate himself to Jewish media outlets, helped to place the Jewish community in a new position. By embracing their Ottoman identity, they, along with two other major non-Muslim communities, Armenians and Greeks, were able to enter mainstream politics and secure a certain measure of cultural autonomy. This, I argue, was the basis of Ottoman civic nationalism, which was not the sense of an across-the-board equality, but rather a system that left non-Muslim minorities vying for freedoms with the new Ottoman Muslim Turkish political elite. This was a prelude to what we would see in the later Republic. The fluidity of this period was a unique moment in Ottoman history, one that would come to a screeching halt during World War I, most evidently in the Armenian genocide, ending any hope for civic nationalism. However, the acceptance of Jews in society was also being challenged before World War I. With their growing public presence following the Young Turk Revolution, Jews found allies in some of the top members of the Muslim elite, such as Riza Tevfik Bey, who passionately believed in the sincerity of their political presence. However, other Ottoman politicians like Ebu Ziya Tevfik and Ali Kamal continued to spread anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. With the digitalization of the Ottoman press archives today, scholars are coming to terms with the rampant anti-Semitism, which led many Jews to fear that the more they entered the public sphere, the stronger the discrimination against them would become. Though the Ottoman government, under the Committee of Union and Progress, did their best to combat it, a growing cloud of distress emerged among Jews in the years of the end of the empire. Zionism was still disputed within the Jewish community, but the youth began to cling to it as an expression of Jewish pride. The idea of an independent Jewish state was far beyond their dreams. The Zionist movement itself was still expressing pro-Ottoman sentiments at this time. Even with the Jewish community enduring a major transformation, it was still also a very close community. This is exemplified in the divisions over language within the vast Ottoman lands. The debate was between French or Turkish. Within the Arab lands, it was the primacy of Arabic was settled, but what came next in line, French or Turkish? And in Palestine, Hebrew was agreed upon, but whether Turkish or Arabic would take second place was still a question. These were unsettled decisions at the end of World War I, when the Jewish community, like all Ottomans, could not imagine that their world would soon to be turned upside down. By the time of the Turkish Republic's establishment in 1923, the Ottoman Jewish community had ceased to exist. A community once characterized by its mobility throughout the Ottoman lands was now cut off from the Balkans, from their cultural hub in Salonika, following the wars in 1913. At this time, Jewish communities were mostly based in Istanbul and Izmir, with smaller communities across Turkey, primarily in the Aegean region, such as Manisa, Gire, Aydin, and Bergama. There was also vibrant communities in the region of Thrace, such as Edirne, Çorlu, and Çanakkale, situated in the European part of the country. The majority of the new Turkish community of Jews was characterized by its overwhelmingly Sephardic population, with most still embracing the language and culture of Judeo-Spanish. However, there were also Ashkenazi communities spread out in various cities and some rural communities. During the late 19th century, some Jews had established Hebrew-speaking communities in Akhisar, which is Or Yehuda, or Mesilah Hadasha, which is very close to Sabanci today, which is Sultan Beyli. Following the war, all Jewish rural settlements would cease to exist. And in the documents, they write, Mesilah Hadasha, it would take 3 hours to get there on horseback. And today it takes 3 hours to get there in traffic, right? As the new republic went in the direction of a centralized nation state, I'm still laughing at my joke, I have to stop. It's a good one, right? Start back. As the new republic went in the direction of a centralized nation state, promoting the idea of one nation, one people, and one language, the Jewish community was divided among those who opted to pursue integration and those who were suspicious of the Turkification of their formerly Judeo-Spanish community. Furthermore, the tragedies of World War I left a huge impact, from the massacres of the Armenians to the ethnic cleansing of the Greek population, which culminated in a population exchange with Greece. The message the Jewish community received, the message they received as a small non-Muslim community was clear: integrate or leave. As we will see, already in the 1920s, much of their community chose to leave the area that would become Turkey. They left for France, Italy, Greece, the US, Canada, Mexico, Cuba, Uruguay, and Palestine, due to economic, social, and political factors. Even before the state's official Turkification policies were implemented, the Jewish community in Turkey was already deeply fractured. In the post-1923 era, the Turkish government doggedly pursued an ethno-nationalist agenda, wherein the Jewish community was forced to exchange the cultural autonomy they had under the Ottoman Empire for a rigid form of Turkish nationalism, including cultural assimilation. During these years, Judeo-Spanish and other minority languages, such as Greek, became taboo. Political campaigns promoting the exclusive use of Turkish in the public sphere were rampant. Though many Jews supported the Republican agenda and Jewish communities encouraged the use of Turkish language, strict Turkification policies took a toll. In other words, Jews in Turkey were, at best, treated like immigrants within their own homeland, at worst, as an internal threat. Like the Jews who left the country, those who stayed were also uprooted from their culture. Some influential members of the community, such as Avram Galante, encouraged Jews to adopt Turkish names. Moses Cohen, the famous one many people know, for example, opted the name Munis Tekin to adopt Munis Tekin Alp during the war. By the 1930s, Jews could be seen speaking Turkish to one another on the streets of Istanbul, heeding the national slogan of "Citizen, be Turkish." Though the Jewish community was not subject to massacres, genocide, and population exchanges during World War I, as were the Armenians and Greeks, they did face discriminatory acts, including violent ones. Therefore, Jewish migration, especially from 1934 to 1935, should not be considered voluntary. Between 1934 and 1955, should not be considered voluntary. During the 1934 Thrace incidents, Jewish communities in Edirne, Çorlu, Çanakkale, Tekirdağ, and other cities in Thrace suffered a night of attacks that forced their relocation to Istanbul. with some choosing to immigrate from Turkey once and for all. In 1942, the government passed a wealth tax that targeted mostly non-Muslims, with Jews bearing the greatest toll. The exorbitant sums at which the government taxed on non-Muslim business owners led many families to lose everything. Those who could not pay the tax were sent to a work camp in Ashkale, in eastern Turkey, quote, where they were forced to build roads in sub-zero temperatures. This experience, according to Rifat Bali, became, quote, an indelible traumatic memory for those who suffered it and their families. Both the Thrace incidents and the wealth tax occurred alongside a wave of anti-Semitism in the Turkish press. On September 6th and 7th, 1955, Greek citizens of Istanbul suffered a pogrom. Some Jewish and Armenian properties were also destroyed in those 2 days of devastation and looting that forever changed Istanbul. In short, if we consider World War I alongside the years that immediately preceded the establishment of the Turkish Republic through the 50s, it is not difficult to see how Turkey transformed into a country whose population of non-Muslims today is less than perhaps 2% or 1%. With the immigration to Europe impossible during the years leading up to World War II, and with the United States and other countries in the Americas already hesitant to accept Jewish migration, Palestine became a main destination for Jews. This was the case not just for Ashkenazi Jews, who were more vocal in their support of Zionism, but also for Sephardim as well. Between 1923 and 1948, over 7,000 Jews immigrated to Palestine, with 4,000 leaving alone in 1943 and 44 as a direct result of the wealth tax. This set the stage for a mass exodus to Israel in 1948. In the 3 years following the establishment of the state, almost 35,000 Jews, around 40% of the community, left for Israel. The mass immigration included many Jews outside of the city centers, such as from Manisa, Aydin, Tire, Milas in Western Anatolia, cities such as Tokat in Central Anatolia, and the cities of Diyarbakir and Van. Despite quite a few Jews returning to Turkey, and I should point this out, I don't write this here, but in comparison to mass expulsions that later happened in Iraq or different expulsions in some of the Arab countries, Jews have the possibility, they have that reason, they have that ability to come back to Turkey also. And many often choose coming back after they reach Israel. During the first years, they see what they call the Ma'abarot camps, the very hard conditions people are living in. And they say, you know what, we're going back to Istanbul. Or often they could leave from Samsun to Israel, from Israel to Istanbul. That also happened often, that they would leave their small towns, end up back in Turkey, but in Istanbul as basically as immigrants to the city. Despite quite a few Jews returning to Turkey, Israel continued to be the main destination for many who had fewer means and could not secure other opportunities. Meanwhile, a taboo around leaving for Israel that first emerged in the early Republican years only strengthened in the 1970s, when radical leftist groups began forging ties with Palestinian resistance groups, and Islamist parties revived conspiracy theories of Zionist world dominance. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism remains quite visible in today's public sphere. However, before the internet and social media, it was easier to ignore. With many Turkish Jews living in a secular middle class neighborhoods, they were often sheltered from widespread anti-Semitic hate speech proliferating in the Islamist press. Anti-Semitism also is only one factor, so not the main one sometimes, behind the continued waves of immigration to Israel from Turkey that occurred in the 70s. The end of world, yes, I'm coming close to conclusion now. The end of World War I forced the community to transform from an Ottoman to a Turkish one, even as they continued to face anti-Semitism, violence, and exclusion from full membership in the nation. Meanwhile, Israel promised to be a place where they could pursue a full Jewish life, able to continue participating in Jewish traditions and integrate into a Jewish culture. Today, there are only about 10,000 Jews left in Turkey, and nearly all of them live in a few neighborhoods in Istanbul. There are only a handful of marriages each year in the community, and the number of babies born is dwindling among an aging population. Within the upper and middle classes, Turkish Jews are increasingly marrying also Muslim and other non-Muslim families. The future of the Jewish community in Turkey is unclear. So here's just a quick conclusion. In 2009, 2 years following the assassination of Hrant, I presented my first paper on the non-Muslim communities in Turkey at the Hrant Memorial Workshop, entitled Remnants of the Past Present, Jews, Armenians, and Greeks as Living/Historical Artifacts. Putting aside that this was the first time I was able to share my post-Ottoman studies work with a larger audience, which took place within a heavy sense of fresh mourning over the killed journalist, it also provided a space to speak with people from the different communities about my own paper. One Turkish Jewish friend, however, snickered at the title I had presented. And she said, Louis, already in the 1950s, we were the remnants. Now we are just what is left of those remnants. I've never forgotten such a statement. It has remained embedded in my memory within my search and research for how Turkish Jews are remembered today in Turkey. Today, the community is a vibrant community despite its small size. And as I point out, it's not at all an imagined community. Since once it fills up the few synagogues that are acting, it becomes a tangible community with not only memories, but also dreams. Yes, within these remnants, we see so many signs of vitality of life. It is a dynamic community that has also opened its doors to a much larger Turkish Muslim community that is anxious to learn about the past of the other in an attempt to create a multicultural present out of the remnants of the past. However, and I must say this, the toll of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, this I wrote this morning, has weighed hard. Over the last 2 decades, the community has been placed center stage. And I'm talking beyond the 1986 attack on Neve Shalom and the 2003 massive attacks on the 2 synagogues, which was followed by the attacks on HSBC and the British consulate. With so many of them having family in Israel, and the many who continue to make Israel the home, in Turkey, they have to silence their ties with relatives, and even more so, their fears for them. In Turkey today, Jews are both loved, and sadly, they too are hated, as we see with moments of blatant anti-Semitism like these past days. I will end with one last anecdote. After meeting a Turkish Jew in Israel, who was fresh out of the Jewish high school in Ulus, Istanbul, a conversation ensued. He reported that he had enough and had moved to Israel to start a new life. With him knowing that I at one time gave talks at the Jewish school, he kindly asked me, if you return to the high school, please do not share with my Muslim teachers that I had moved to Israel. I don't want them to think that I betrayed my homeland. Like so many Turkish Jews in Israel, and I imagine what might have become of him, in Israel they merge together in their own local synagogues, meet with each other for holiday dinners, and often go back and forth to Istanbul, sometimes even keeping their homes there. Lastly, Turkish Jews too are part of a larger secular Turkish community that no longer finds a place in a country that has changed radically. As we know, the clampdown on freedoms and an ailing economy, many among the youth, Jewish or non-Jewish, reach for other destinations throughout the world. Today, along with their other Turkish secular counterparts, they fill the positions, international firms, in academia, and in sciences. In other words, motivation for leaving is far beyond issues of only anti-Semitism, but much larger, what I call national issues. If anything, thus, the Turkish project succeeded in making them Turkish. And with that dream that was constructed now being replaced by the new Turkey, they too find little room to remain within a country they find hard to identify with. Thank you.